people to join in and thereafter start. Uh, Welcome everyone. Welcome to the webinar on BRSR framework and COSO guidance in partnership with the IAA India. Uh, so we have an eminent panel here. Um, and before we get on to the proceedings, I would just like to quickly take you through some rules here. We anyway streaming through audio. If you're there, you could probably see you can use a Chrome for anybody who's having a difficulty joining in as well. We are recording this session and it will be available as on-demand viewing later as well. If you have any questions, kindly use the chat window, the Q&A window, which is appearing on the right-hand side of your screen. And we will take up those questions towards the end of the session. So I would now pass it on to Mr. Anjani Agrawal, who's the moderator for the session. Over to you, sir. Thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the second in the series of webinars organized by Protiviti in collaboration with IIA. Very interesting topic. We have we are delighted to have a fabulous panel, as good as it can ever get to. But before that, let me set the context. We're all part of an ecosystem called business. And business itself is a subset of the universal system and is interdependent on the planet, its resources, its environment, and humanity and community in large. Now, despite the economic progress the world has made and India is making, the challenges of climate crisis, the finite resources, living beyond the means of planetary boundary, and the not so much of equity in the social system are actually increasingly profound and frequent and more visible. And what it does is this has led to a challenge on the business, and stakeholders believe that business is at the core of it, and business should be leading the provision of solutions to address this challenge. Now, which has led to the world over, this has manifested in signing of the Sustainable Development Goals by almost every country. In a way, those are collective expression of dreams of 7 billion people. Also led to countries declaring their own national goals and voluntary declarations, governments putting in place their systems and policymakers and the ministries to work on the targets, and also the steer the government programs to achieve those goals, push and influence the private sector to do their bit to participate and at times lead the initiative, and also to monitor the journey at a country level and progress, and which is largely in our case done by Niti Aayog. Also, side by side, regulators like SEBI, in our case RBI, and the exchanges are playing their bit by setting the standards, the guidelines, and regulations, are deemed to influence the business activities in the country, and steer and monitor the goals and performances. Now, corporate sector is obviously a big part of this, rightfully so, particularly private sector and the capital. So are the capital providers, which are supposed to be the influencers in making this happen through the journey. Like other regulators in Europe and elsewhere, SEBI has played its leading role, and SEBI has led the way by, in a way, sort of initiating, socializing along with the private sector, and to some extent, consensus building in setting the standards of measurement and reporting by the economic players that it has influence on, namely the listed companies and the financial intermediaries. Now, in that context, we have already have the BRSR, which is pretty comprehensive in its content and expectation. And in July 23, few months back, it added a core to sort of specify certain reporting requirements and also set expectations around providing an assurance. While doing so, it also extended the initiative to embed a larger part of the economy by extending it to the value chain partners of large corporates, and we will see some of those details as we move along. Now, while traditional financial reporting has been in terms of India, it has been in a way sort of leading in some way and ahead in adoption of global standards. When it comes to sustainable, there are unique characteristics of the sustainability themes, given their wide spectrum of themes that are relevant to the ESG, both on environment and social and governance. And they have their own unique characteristics. But let me bring in one characteristic just to build the bridge to the topic of the day. This is around stakeholders. So you have traditional stakeholders who are looking at this area with a new lens. The investors are looking at risk, physical risk, transition risk, and what's the long-term value creation, how the business leveraging the opportunity provided by sustainability agenda. The regulators are looking at moving from voluntary to sort of mandatory coverage, disclosure, and assurance. Rating agencies have a big part of their model centered around ESG. Asset owners, capital providers want to understand what is the resilience of their portfolio around the ESG theme, how their investing companies are producing products and services that are value, and what's the long-term, sort of value creation that is happening. There are new set of stakeholders, namely the customers. They want to engage with brands that are supposed to be do the right thing, and the value chain partners want to understand how corporates are partnering with the value chain system to contribute to the solutions. There are interestingly some very unexpected set of stakeholders which are around civil society, NGOs, and social media that are getting active on the ESG space. There are data aggregators, the rating agencies are interested in our ESG sort of data that is being put out, and policymakers, and so on and so forth. Now, what it means is the stakeholders, there are wider spectrum of stakeholders now coming into play on the ESG matters, very diversified, more demanding than ever, and with their wider set of expectations and diverse value measures of their own. Their way of measuring what is the value created by business in terms of ESG parameters are very diverse. So that bit on stakeholders. Couple of things on the reporting side. Now the question is BRSR is the only report, or the core, now the core would be part of this, or any communication or anything provided, any report or information provided in public domain by a corporate is in a bigger sense a report, or and is that subject to scrutiny? Can the stakeholders, which are, as we explained, a wide spectrum of stakeholders, can they hold the company accountable? Things to ponder. While we may dealing with the assurance, limited assurance, or reasonable assurance on the core, but point to ponder is, are we as corporates going to be accountable? I guess so. Yes, my answer would be yes, but let's debate about it. Now, what is the really the and why is governance to that extent is more important beyond what is strictly a part of the report, regulatory report. But I think For case in example, let's say the advertisements that the company puts out, or the private product levels that are produced, or let's say the announcements that are made, all are relevant from a broader perspective of the reporting or communication. So that's where probably the COSO ICSR guidelines may come handy. So with that, as a curtain raiser, maybe I'll hand over to Jayanti to really have an overview of the recent changes, and then we will have a panel discussion. We will have time. We'll try and keep time for questions from the audience. And over to Jayanti.
Thank you, Mr. Anjali. So, as Ajay mentioned, this is the overall context and overview of today's discussion. We would be covering the SEBI on ESG related matters, the different reforms that has come out, the specifics of this latest SEBI circular on BRSR core and disclosures. The third would be the significance of the COSO framework and guidance with respect to sustainability reporting, and then we'll open up for the panel discussion on the same. So over the last few years, and especially in the last 1 year, there will be a lot of new regulations that has been laid out by SEBI around ESG matters. A few of them you're able to see here. Almost around 6 reforms have come out. The first one being the BRSR reporting, the business responsibility sustainability reporting, which has been mandated for the top 1,000 listed companies. There are other circulars and consultation papers around the different areas including ESG investing principles, green bonds, transition bonds, greenwashing, and as well as ESG ratings. To say forward here, so these voluntary. Many of the circulars here are on voluntary basis, and many are going to be put to place into a circular as a compliance as well. So today's focus is on the BRSR, the Business Responsibility Sustainability Reporting. So how this circular formulated over the timeline, in 2021 they came out, almost it started in 2012 with the BRR reporting, which was made voluntary for the top 100 companies. And the compliance came in around May 2021, requesting companies to report the BRSR as a voluntary in 21-22, made mandatory for 22-23 for all the top 1,000 listed companies. In the beginning of this year, there was a consultation paper published on the BRSR core and the value chain partners disclosures. These and the proposals were approved by SEBI and henceforth a new circular was issued in July 2023 in respect to the BRSR core and the ESG disclosures for value chain partners and their assurance requirements in itself. So, what are the key features of this entire BRSR framework? Yes, there's a new element called BRSR Core, which is we'll see in detail what does BRSR Core mean. The entire BRSR format that was published in 2021 is an updated new BRSR format. And we have there is also a definition very specific to BRSR Core for the value chain partners and the assurance requirements for BRSR Core. So these are the 4 new key features of the BRSR framework. So as I mentioned, the circular defines what BRSR Core is. We will see it in a further slide. The point to emphasize here is the value chain partners. So value chain partners, BRSR Core has to be covered around 75% of by purchase or sales of both upstream and downstream partners of an organization. That's the definition of the value chain partners. We'll see now in detail what is this BRSR core means. They have defined 9 key ESG attributes under this BRSR core. It is nothing but a subset of the existing BRSR format in itself, in which there are around 4 environmental key ESG attribute, like the greenhouse gas footprints, water footprint, energy footprint, and circularity. There are 3 social specific ESG metrics. One is enhancing employee well-being and safety, enabling inclusive development, and the third one being enabling gender diversity in business. And the 2 more on the governance aspect, openness of business and fairness in engaging with customers and suppliers. So this is the 9 key ESG attributes, the way they are being reported in the BRSR. This is called out as a BRSR Core as a subset, which is required for an assurance later for these companies. You'll see what is that assurance that is required about. So for this BRSR core, I repeat, only for this BRSR core and not for the entire BRSR report, the top 1,000 listed companies have to produce this BRSR core data point this from this year, financial year 23-24. And the reasonable assurance for this BRSR core needs to start with the top 150 companies again this financial year 23-24, and so on and so forth over 3 years. SEBI is trying to cover around top 1,000 companies by 26-27 on reasonable assurance applicability itself. So what is the applicability to value chain partners in this circular? For the value chain partners, this BRSR core value is applicable from next year, that is 24-25, for the top 250 companies, where they have to provide this data point for around 75% of their value chain partners. And with respect to assurance for the same, the limited assurance for the value chain partners on the BRSR core is expected from the year 25-26 for the top 250 companies. So having said this, this is the overall, I would say a brief on the entire circular, their applicability, and the essence of the entire circular in itself. So moving forward, so we understand that there are a lot of regulations, not only in India, across the world as well. There are new regulations coming from regulators, mainly due to a lot of NDC's commitment from the different countries with respect to the Paris Climate Agreement or the climate change targets, net zero emission targets. These countries are committing to, where these are getting converted from voluntary to more of a compliant requirement in itself. So this is where we thought we should have the governance aspect comes into picture with respect to the entire reporting in itself. So we covered this specific COSO ICSR guidance, that is internal controls for sustainability reporting, in our one of our previous webinars. This is as Anjani ji mentioned, this is the second series of it, where we dealt with in detail on this standard in itself, guidance in itself. So why this matters and why is it a big deal? Yes, the entire any ESG reporting or a sustainability reporting is completely widespread, and this data that is getting reported in these sustainability reportings are pretty inconsistent for whichever level of maturity of organization that we are looking at. So COSO's guidance is to bring clarity around this ESG reporting, and what controls needs to be put in place as a governance strategy within the organizations, since there is a lot of statements, data, and other related information about the company that has been submitted part of the sustainability reporting. So this is the guidance that looks like. The main intention is to achieve internal controls over the sustainability reporting. So here, the entire building blocks of COSO guidance over the financial reporting, it's a similar aspect that has been translated to a sustainability reporting in itself, such that companies can consider this for both financial and the non-financial reporting aspect of the organization. So it does cover, as I said, similarly around the same building blocks of financial reporting, around 5 components, 17 principles, and 77 point of focus. For each and every point of focus, what are the practical insights around sustainability reporting has been provided, and over a supplemental guidance on this area. The main thing to consider here is that the three major attributes of any ESG reporting or a sustainability reporting, how they refer from a financial reporting. If you look at the boundary, it's not more of a control aspect like a financial reporting. It's more of an influence on what are the areas, the impact of the organization is. If you look at predicting, or I would say the report itself, the judgment around the reports is more not completely quantitative, more qualitative and a narrative based judgments. And the estimations and expectations in the ESG reporting is more of forward looking rather than a historical data that you would see in any financial reporting. So this is the key aspect to consider in the guidance. Just to give you an example, how practical these guidances to develop the different controls within the organization on the sustainability reporting. If you look at if an organization has to demonstrate their commitment to integrity and ethical values, of course, the point of focus is to establish standards and code of conduct, adherence, evaluating adherence to this code of conduct, and addressing the deviations in a timely manner. This is the three major point of focus. And for an example of control activity for such would look like the organization, do they have a code of conduct and ethics policy which details how to report the violations, like a whistleblower program or a protection program. And second is, does the organization have a ethics hotline for employees and things like that. And overall, looking at a commitment and a governance level towards sustainability, organizations can use different global frameworks. An example could be committing to themselves to UN Global Compact with respect to annual reporting on the progress of the sustainability reporting in itself. So this is just an example of the controls. And yes, the importance of these controls, it is important that all the risk elements as well that needs to be identified around all the aspects of the business with respect to sustainability, and those risk identify and the controls that are mitigation strategy and the controls that are in place to monitor such risk and mitigate them at a timely level needs to be built in within the RACM framework of the entire organization itself. So this is just an expert from a library, RACM library for a ESG reporting in itself. So having said this, so there are different practical uses of this entire guidance. However, how we relate this to the BRSR or any sustainability reporting of an organization is that so there is a lot of data, a lot of statements, a lot of qualitative information around these areas that an organization is producing in these reports. Ideally, they should be subject to a right process and procedure and controls within the organization before they are put into a compiled report in itself. So that is where this guidance comes into play for a good guidance around how we go about implementing these strategies within the organization. So from here, I hand it over to Anjani ji for the panel discussion.
Thank you, Jayanti. That was a quick round walk around the changes. So we have a great panel, ladies and gentlemen. So very brief introductions to the panel. We have Santosh Jairam, who has been amongst the leading practitioners from Big Four, leading ESG practice earlier, and then he's a global head of sustainability at HCL Technologies, again a global organization. We have Seema Grover. She's the heading the treasury risk and group controller and insurance functions at Dr. Reddy's, again a very important sector that can provide solutions to a lot of the problems the world has. We have Rajendran Arunachalam, who is the executive vice president and group CFO for Thermax, not only a large manufacturer capital goods and provider, but also has several products in the portfolio that address some of those ESG challenges for the world. So great to have you, ladies and gentlemen, here. So let me maybe begin with Santosh. What, in your view, Santosh, are the controls that are why they are getting prominence in a way in the ESG reporting and especially in BRSR? And what's the relevance you see of the COSO supplemental guidance that Jayanti just flashed through?
First of all, thank you for having me here. The reason why internal control and some of these discussions and the role of a GRC professional in ESG and all those things are coming to prominence is mainly because of the shift which is happening in the reporting space. Now, till now, the whole of this sustainability reporting, people can use either terms ESG reporting or sustainability reporting. It has been more voluntary. You had the voluntary standards like the GRI, even SASB, and or for example, TCFD and integrated reporting framework. So all these things have been voluntary in nature, and people have been reporting against these voluntary requirements. But the shift is happening now towards more of a regulatory reporting, like the BRSR, what you talked about. We have the new regulation in Europe coming in with the CSRD. Very recently, Brazil, about a couple of weeks back, have come out with their requirement. You have requirements now coming up in the US, the state of California already has, and then Australia. So around the world, you are seeing a lot of shift towards a regulatory frame of reporting. Now, take the case of BRSR. Very specifically, it asks the director responsible. You have to name the director who is responsible. What it does is that now with the regulatory reporting, the potential liabilities of a wrong reporting of a company is much, much, much higher. Add to that the assurance. So the assurance is mandated under many of the regulatory regimes, including BRSR, CSRD, and all. So add to that the assurance. So the liabilities are going to increase. And it is in these circumstances, because the whole of the ESG reporting, as Jayanti already mentioned, it is all over the organization. It is, unlike a financial reporting, it is not at a central place, right? I mean, it's all over the organization. So I think getting all those data points, ensuring accuracy, reliability, putting it across, understanding that there is a liability going to be there for the company, that's the major change which is happening, which is bringing in a whole lot of importance to the internal control system. And until unless the organization have a very good, very well designed internal control system, I don't think they will stand scrutiny of assurances, or it will be a high risk for companies to stand scrutiny of assurances as well. So I think that's where the COSO supplemental guidance is also coming in. Actually, it's a supplemental guideline. I mean, they had the framework earlier. Like what they did was that they produced a supplementary guideline which uses the framework, but very specifically talks about the ESG reporting. So why would somebody like COSO come out with something like that? Is mainly because this change of course which is happening.
Absolutely. And I can, apart from the regulatory responsibility, I guess the impairment of valuation of an enterprise that can happen by one wrong reporting on the ESG matters because of the close scrutiny. You're like a spotlight of so many stakeholders that I mentioned from all angles. We are more exposed than ever as corporates to do the right things, not only do the right things, communicate the right things, and with full integrity and transparency. So I can see that. Santosh, I also sit on some public boards, and large, some of them are global. Now we are dealing with this challenge, and which is for an Indian multinational entity. How do we plan to report on the core indicators? Will it be global? Should it be India specific? Where do we bring the concepts of the materiality? One is financial materiality, but in the ENC context, there is another set of tools to judge materiality, etc. So your thoughts, please.
Okay, so unlike the European regulation or the way in which ISSB is evolving, BRSR hasn't defined materiality. Okay, so that way it leaves it to the organization to define materiality. Now, materiality, the big shift which is happening, or the major discussion which is happening around the world, is that the whole of the EU CSRD regulation goes with a double materiality principle, and the ISSB is more towards a single materiality, which means single materiality means what is the risk for the company from E, S, and G, whereas the double materiality is also the company's impact on E, S, and G. So the CSRD covers both sides, and so there is a lot of discussion around that. I won't get into that. But unlike all these things, the SEBI hasn't defined materiality, so it leaves it to the company. But SEBI requirement is also very the BRSR is also very specific, in the sense that in other regulations it gives a bit more leeway for you to kind of what I can say, you can customize your whereas here it is a very prescriptive. You have to report this. So that way, even if you define materiality, it doesn't mean much because you have to report what is stated over there. Okay, so it's very prescriptive. The second part is the question you asked is that global company, do you report only India? I would say it depends upon that particular. So let me take a couple of examples from the core indicator, which the BRSR amendments are now focused on. For example, climate change related to GHG emission indicators. Now, there is no point of us as a global company to report only India specific requirements because our stakeholders are around the globe. So it makes sense for me to report globally. Okay. Now, definitely those indicators are ones which we will definitely report globally. Now, for example, 235,000 plus employees. Now, the safety, I should not be only defining myself to India employees safety related disclosures, right? So it makes sense for me to do the global disclosure. But there are some indicators where you can't, or you will have some challenges in reporting because, for example, let me give you a firm example, which is when they are seeking you to report on the employment in smaller towns and referring to an RBI definition of smaller town. RBI definition of smaller town will not apply to other parts of the world.
Right.
So there, actually, you will have to report the India reporting. Right. Or, for example, I can tell you POSH. They very clearly specify POSH. Now, POSH is an act in India.
Yes.
Not across the world. So when I have to report on that, it need to be India. So I think it's an organization call, but we at HCL Tech, we are taking it that where it makes sense for us to report on global numbers, we are going to report. Some of the parameters we cannot be reporting globally. It has to be India specific because it's related to an Indian act or an Indian definition. There it will be Indian, and we will qualify that by very clearly stating that this is India specific.
Very well said. Let me turn to Seema. So Seema, you were at an organization which is a provider to the world for health and well-being. So it might be interesting for the audience to know what's the shape of sustainability related strategy and reporting, etc., that healthcare majors like you might evolve into in terms of the service portfolio approaches, pricing, so do share what's your initial sort of approach on strategy and reporting.
Yeah, thanks, Anjani. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Yeah, thank you, everyone, and good evening. I was just thinking as Santosh was speaking on the sustainability journey for our organization, Dr. Reddy's, we started this voluntarily in 2002, and then based on GRI reporting, we reported in 2004. We came with sustainability statement in 2007. This year we have, and every year there are various accomplishments, and this year we have filed our integrated reporting from our organization. So what I was trying to think and reflect on, actually sustainability has always been core to our purpose, and it is there in the way we work and in the way we think. So many healthcare organizations are thinking in the same manner. But what I would like to highlight is what is happening in our organization and relate to various stories that how we are doing it for the society from that perspective. So our purpose has been good health can't wait, and the whole aspiration has been bifurcated into 4 buckets. One is our patients, which are they are our center and our core. Then it is all about our people, planet, and stakeholders. So very important, Anjani, you also asked is more from patient perspective, how this whole framework is working. So for us, by 2030, we have agreed that we will touch 1.5 billion lives of patients. That is the target we have taken. By 2027, we said we will likely to launch 3 innovative solutions that touch patients in a very different way. And the third thing, in 2027, we have a target that 25% of our products are first to market from a launch perspective. So I would like to share here various stories that the organizations are doing and our organization also is focused on. For example, yeah, Anjani, you want to say something
No,
before I?
no, that's great. I think corporates like you obviously have been leading the initiative around strategy much beyond the regulatory, much before the regulatory sort of requirement came in. What would be interesting to know is, given that the BRSR and reporting, etc., do not specify a sector-specific sort of reporting points, how are you going to deal with those? How do you tell the all the stakeholders what it means, in terms of
Yeah,
your initiatives, and how do they impact, how do they further the goal on ESG matters for India and the world? So that will
yeah,
be, what do you plan to put out as a part of the BRSR core specifically, let's say,
yeah,
given that they don't talk about any sector specific. We need to craft, all
yeah,
sectors probably need to craft their own sort of space and find what is fit for purpose. So any
yes.
thoughts around that would be helpful.
Yeah. So, for our organization and for healthcare organizations, the most important purpose will be actually accessibility to unmet needs of the people, and that they should be accessible. When I say accessible, it could be pricing, it would be from perspective there is a need and which has to be met, and there is also affordability, and maybe it is accessible in terms that not only in pricing, it should be accessible for us to meet that need.
Right.
Now, for example, oncology, we all know oncology, the kind of cancer, the spread it has. So from that perspective, what the organization is doing is tying up for innovative solutions. There is a therapy called CAR-T therapy, which is a very differentiated therapy in its space. So working it around for those kind of models and solutions. The second thing is from perspective of the digital solutions. Now, digital solutions, how they value add to people from a healthcare sector. For every person, the health and the well-being is so critical and core. So it is not only consuming medicines. When you look at end to end, it is also providing the complete services. So in terms of a nutritionist, in terms of an exercise regime, in terms of what nutrition you should have, what medicine, it is end to end holistic thought process.
Right.
So these are the few things that the organization is doing from health and well-being for the patient. The other things that if we look from a our people perspective, it is definitely women diversity, women leadership. It is physically challenged, they being part of our workforce. I would not get more into planet because for many of us it is very similar, be it water
That's right.
neutrality, carbon neutrality,
That's right.
etc. And
Yeah.
from stakeholder, it is all about being having the best practices on ethics and sustainability and corporate governance practices. The third important thing I would want to highlight is on supply chain. I think it's not only we internally doing it, but as part of end-to-end value chain on our strategic supply partners, are we also ensuring that the ESG compliance is in place?
Very
Our
well.
sustainability practices are there. So this is broadly the categorization of the activities that across the whole ESG framework that we are focusing on.
Very good. Let me turn to Rajendran. So Rajendran, uh, you deal with your value chain must be amongst the widest, because you're producing an end product which goes into a projects, and then thereon the story starts for production of products from those, let's say a boiler, then you start from there, and before this you have all those suppliers. So one of those complex value chains. Now you've heard about this value chain partners requirement which has come in new, and providing assurance. So do you think companies like yours at the what's your view on, are we as India ready to sort of provide quality data on the value chain, as desired, required by BRSR Core, and where will you draw the line? So maybe let's just start with that.
Sure. I hope I'm audible.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. And yes, Mr. Anjani, I think you have brought out some complexities already in the question. So from an Termax perspective, yes, we have a value chain partners, which if you were to look at it from an supply chain side, completely complex, with lots of small and medium scale vendors that we deal with, as well as large this thing. And they not only are on the product side, but even on the services side, as well as at some kind of site services and construction activities as well. So the plethora of people and organizations that we deal with on a supply chain is mind-boggling in that sense. And coverage of 75% reporting that's been currently mandated by SEBI would entail a large exercise on that front. And fairly with the unstructured kind of organizations, as at least with regards to this new framework, which is come up now. But have before going there more in detail, I think first is, I think definitely from an reporting perspective, what SEBI is attempting to do on the value chain partner side is something commendable. It should be welcomed by us, because it's going to provide a lot of clarity for for India as a whole, because of its net zero commitment and the goal that it's taken. And I think as corporates, it's our responsibility to provide this information, which will help India move ahead on this direction with more clarity. Currently, I think the measurement on this front is not so scientific, even with the best of the regulatory agencies or the government, and hence we should do our bit on that front. Having said that, I think the challenge part is really on the SEBI's certain aspects of putting out 75% coverage at the very first stage, and then going on the assurance part of it also at a later time, when there are many things that are untied in that sense. Just to take as an example, the value chain partners for us would, let's say, if we were to cover 75% of our customers as well as our vendors, would cover quite a large population of corporates in India. And if they were asked to follow a certain reporting standard, and which needs to be verified by an assurance partner, and that too within a reporting timeline which corporates have to follow for its and when it's going to be part of their annual reporting, it's going to be fairly a challenging process. Number one. Number two, I think how much of cross verification and reporting is going to be attempted in this process, because every corporate has to attempt this for it 75% of its value chain partner. Then I think, meaning this is the current understanding I at least carry. I may not be an expert on the matter, but I think it appears that there is some challenge which is clearly there on this reporting front, and not something that all corporates will have a bit of issue to get through right the very first time. So I think, while I think I'm just repeating myself, while commendable, and we need to do our bit, but I think it's going to be clearly challenging.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So obviously, there is some method to the madness that one has to sort of discover as to how do we meet the objective honestly and with all the effort that we can do on our belt. So uh, one interesting thing about the value chain is about the customers. Now it seems laudable, but do we think we have influence over our customers? Once you sell a boiler, what happens after that in a project, and then or let's say a genset, what happens after that, how it is run, what it does, is at times beyond control, and unless it's under your service of minimum guarantee warranty sort of. Any thoughts around this aspect of value chain partners? Your opinion, I mean,
Yeah, I
basically
think
figuring out how to deal with it.
yes, I think while you talked about our customers and sometimes they being large and they will have their own practices. If I'm dealing with the large corporates of India, much bigger in size than me, I'm sure that they are going to have certain practices on this core BRSR reporting, which is going to be available. But
The large ones are easy. The
yes,
larger ones would be easy. For example,
I
if
mean,
you're given a genset to MSME somewhere deep in the country, how do you get data? How do you get the guy to keep records, and what happens? It's a challenge. So I think we'll
yes,
have to see how we work with probably SEBI and the industry folks to sort of come around this problem and deal with it, right?
absolutely. I think while I was coming to the problem even from a different angle for the large ones as well, where
Mhm.
if you are to subject to them to an assurance process, how many of them are going to be amenable and available?
Yeah.
And also take the case that you highlighted, that we sell small boilers to commercial sector, where this currently though there is no as corporates, large corporates, we have been able to set up the BRSR reporting and the sustainability reporting practices in the last year or two. Now I don't think any of the small and medium enterprises have given it a thought, nor have they progressed on this. So there's going to be a lot of education on this front that we may have to be doing, as well as helping them set it up. And how far can a corporate go to do this bit?
Yeah.
I think, and as you rightly said, that how much force can I have on them to ensure that after I've sold a boiler in a period of time, but I go back at the end of the year and tell them I need this information and it needs to be subject to an assurance
Right.
review. I think it's all going to be practically very, very challenging, and something that I think we'll have to find our way through. I think I'll have to only stop there.
Okay. Let me turn back to Santosh. Santosh, we heard a lot about limited assurance, then reasonable assurance. What it means? Can you, peel this little bit for the audience, for us?
Yeah. So uh, again, another uh, first, as the Rajendra was mentioning about, the intention is good, because this data doesn't go through a kind of an audit process, so hence the assurance is something which is important. But I should say that going with a reasonable assurance, this is first of its kind in the world. Even the EU CSRD, which is getting up for next year, is recommending only limited assurance.
Right.
And they don't even have set a timeline for reasonable assurance. And in India, we starting with reasonable assurance. It is, yeah, the difference is that when you do, look into the data related to ESG, um, world over, this has been kind of referred to as assurance, and they haven't called it as audit yet, and it has been always called as assurance. And the standards which have been developed in these lines have also qualified them in two levels. One is limited and the other one is reasonable. Limited assurance is, as the name says, it is limited in the sense that the assurance agency kind of takes a cue from the organization, studying the organization in terms of what are the kind of the internal controls and what are the kind of competence levels of the people and all those kind of things, to kind of select a very limited kind of information and make a commentary or verify those things and make a statement which goes as a double negative. The sense that the statement later on the assurance provider issues in a limited assurance says that nothing has come to our notice for us not to believe. Okay, so it's the way in which a limited assurance statement is written. Whereas, as the name suggests, reasonable assurance is something much more elaborate, which is, you can say, very similar or closer to a financial audit, a statutory audit, okay, where you are supposed to do a primary verification of the primary documents. So when you are looking into a GHG emissions, you are supposed to go into, like, if Thermax has supplied the company with a boiler, you have to go into the details, how many hours the boiler run, how much fuel it is used, and to that level, and you are supposed to verify that, which is going to be time consuming as well as rigorous. It's very close to a financial audit, and that is something, and based on that, they will have to make a statement which is very clear. They cannot use the so-called legally applicable language. They have to be very specific, right, saying that whatever work we have done, we have come across this. So it should be in that specification.
I know, but life is going to be more complex, Santosh. This is all still historical data. Still, there is some document, some record somewhere one can verify. But as we move the journey, maybe in some time, into judgments, into decisions, into assumptions, projections, it's going to be extremely complex. But fortunately, we're not there yet. So looks like we will evolve the standards of that can be applied in our case. We are as a country, we have moved ahead, as you rightly said, ahead of the world in expecting an assurance. Maybe that's the psyche of the nation, but that's what it is. Yeah. Seema, we have this international standards of sustainability coming up, S1, S2, for IFRS filers. What do you think? I guess you are a IFRS filer, right? So, any thoughts on that?
Yeah. So,
Quickly, yeah, maybe a couple of minutes.
yeah. So, am I audible? Hope I'm
Yes,
audible.
yes, you
Yeah.
are.
So, IFRS standards S1 and S2, they have been released on 26 June 2023. Now, when are they applicable? So, it says that from 1st Jan 2024, the annual period reporting from that. It means for many of the Indian companies, those who are filing IFRS standards, it will be applicable for period from April 24 till March 25. So that is the current situation. So has any company applied this? I think people are working on it. People are reading it, understanding, and looking what is to be required to be applied for, because it is applicable from FY25 onwards. So the standard S1 is on general requirement for disclosure of financial information, and S2 is for climate specific disclosures. So what the standards require, S1 requires you to report on the risks and opportunities with respect to the standard, and you can follow the TCFD guidelines, principles of strategy, risk, governance, etc. So that broadly it takes care. It also takes care of materiality. Now, I was just hearing Santosh on materiality that you were saying. So Materiality, IFRS standards has very clear guidelines how materiality has to be defined. It is very clear for an organization how materiality is determined. SEBI also very recently came out with materiality guidelines, your 5% of net profit that is applicable from a financial statement perspective. So materiality, what I understand for the audience in simple terms, it is something, any omission or any misstatement of that impacts or influences investor decision. So all of these for material risk and opportunities, this will be applicable. So that's broadly on the S1 standards. S2 are your climate related standards, and
Yes.
they are prescribed by TCFD very specifically. So only what I'm thinking allowed is for many companies that have been voluntary following and has BRSR reporting. I think many of them will be able to implement IFRS S1 and S2. There'll be few nuances, but basically the foundations will be there for them to go and implement, and we also will be doing that. But it is important to watch out for Indian stakeholders even, because Ind AS, if you look at Ind AS, it is not different from IFRS standards. So it is very similar to IFRS with few nuances which are different. Majorly it is same. So they also should watch out, because tomorrow similar standards will come from an Ind AS perspective also.
Yeah, you know what? When you started applying that to sustainability, that's where it gets exciting.
Yeah.
The materiality for a financial report is all in one currency, right? And on two areas, your profitability and your assets. But ESG, your impact areas are wide spectrum. Your currency is non-defined. So it's going to be really exciting and interesting, and that's
Yeah.
where our the intelligent Indian diaspora and Indian community and professionals, we need to really craft something
Yeah.
that maybe we will lead rest of parts of the world in sort of innovating this aspect in some way.
Yeah.
I'm
And it will be
conscious of
possible,
time.
Anjali.
Yeah.
Yeah, it will be possible also. How to define and how to look at materiality.
Yes, of course, of course. Percentages are easy, but percentage of what and what's the impact area? Then you're talking about several materiality aspects. So it's quite complex. So maybe the last one we will do. I'm conscious of time. Quickly, Rajendran. They've talked about sort of intensity in terms of energy and emission, etc. A multi-product company, for example, yourselves and many other organizations, multi-product, multi-service. What do you think is, what can be done and what it will mean to a reader? How do we make sense out of that output?
Sure. I think, yes, there is a bit of a challenge there. I think from the question, I'm sure all of us are able to interpret it that larger organizations which have multiple businesses but have a single BRSR reporting, and we also talked about sector specific KPIs not being defined and not being available. Hopefully, there will be some in the future. But the mix of both this is leading to the corporates with different business portfolios declaring certain of the data which is for the for the entire group or on a consolidated basis, and which may not be in the interest of the regulator, the reader, average reader, or any people who want to follow this or benchmark this or evaluate this. I think it's not going to be helpful. So, given I can give an example at my end that in my organization we do have an chemical business, but then we have there are other large parts of our engineering and manufacturing and site related businesses as well. So I think the chemical sector and the chemical business have their own nuances that probably the reader needs to want to know, or let's say water consumption and so on and so forth. But however, it gets combined with the other metrics and gets reported. So, and benchmarking neither for us nor for the other organizations who might be interested in the data are able to do with this. So I think the solution lies in either the corporates themselves realizing this and voluntarily coming forward to explain it more in detail or add the disclosures. That could be one way forward. Or but then how far are, how many corporates are going to be doing that? Or is there sector specific KPIs, or in case of multiple businesses within with for a corporate, whether they need to comply with different KPIs as applicable? I think these are things that will evolve over a period of time as the reporting stabilizes. I think how it appears it will be.
Absolutely. Absolutely. A lot needs to be done. I think that's where the ingenuity and honesty and integrity and professionalism of all of us within the corporates and outside as service providers that needs to come up in an honest and transparent manner to communicate what is being done, how it is being done, what's being achieved, what's the impact, and also impart some degree of maybe comparability if that is possible, but at least at the corporate level, at least to the stakeholders, it should start making sense. Now let me turn, if time permits, maybe one or two quick questions from the audience. There have been several questions. So question specific to Santosh. Well, there are a lot of guidance around ESG these days. It's making complex, so how should we understand which one to choose? Quick answer, Santosh. It's not easy to quick answer, but yeah.
No, so it's a bit complex in the sense that sorry, BRSR one part of it, and then being a multinational now, naturally CSRD applies to us by 2026 to some of our subsidiaries in EU. So we'll have to start reporting against that. But the complexities start to arise because UK is telling that they will be following the ISSB rather than the CSRD. So now even inside the Europe, you have UK under the ISSB and the CSRD in the EU part of it, then the US. So yes, it's kind of complex. But let me tell you one thing is that although these are different names, almost 80% of the reporting remains the same. So that way, the content part of it, almost 80% is the same. It is slightly the slices and dices you might have to change. But yeah, that takes a bit of effort. In terms of a global stakeholder, it doesn't make sense. From an organization perspective, we can still do it. But the person who is looking at the data and supposed to make some conscious decisions about it, whether they can make sense of reporting in multiple places, in multiple numbers, and all those kind of things, that's where the complexity also lies.
Right. There is a question, is 75% value chain partners in terms of quantum of transaction? Anyone?
I think it's value, yeah. Meaning, I think
Value of transaction.
By value. By value.
Right.
And one more thing, Anjani, I will add on that, which I think Rajendra has kind of this thing where it says that the company shall report the KPIs in the BRSR core for their value chain to the extent it is attributable to their business with that value chain partner. Now that adds super complexity.
Yeah.
And I can't even understand some of the parameters, like for example, in the value chain. Now, core indicators are the ones which we are supposed to report. Now, the number of POSH complaints in the value chain, how is it attributable? And especially for a client, vendors is one thing, but for the clients, you start reporting.
Yeah.
Or, for example, number of people employed in smaller towns, how is it attributable? I don't know. It's kind of super complex when it becomes attributable.
Absolutely. I can relate to that. Time is up, but let me take one last question from the audience. Second. Will ESG reporting call for areas in which corporates compete and areas in which they certainly collaborate? I don't know. Yeah, any
Well, I guess the issue is with regards to this value chain partners reporting itself. I'm sure there's, as I mentioned this, that there are going to be a lot of cross uh, you know talk, or many corporates will have to be reaching out to many others on this front. And I think I do see that there is some portals and other things that are being talked about. It would have been much simpler, and I think has been suggested that if every corporate wants to try and do this in its own way, and if everyone has to comply for the other corporate, then it's going to be a complete big challenge that we are all creating for ourselves. So it has to be an portal that's probably driven by a central authority like SEBI, or someone where the reporting is all done by all corporates, and then as long as you believe that that corporate is a value chain partner for you, then you can go and access it and use that for your reporting. Something simpler, uh, it needs to evolve. I don't think individual corporates trying to cooperate or coordinate to develop this portal or reporting is all going to be practically happening.
right? So with that, we come to the sort of end of the webinar. I think there is a lot of good questions, lot of questions we have dealt with. A lot. The journey is exciting, and a very profound one for actually mankind right now. So we probably have over responsibility to contribute this journey to make it more meaningful for everyone and achieve the objectives and progress on ESG parameters. I think as we move reporting from, sort of we have to craft a balance of judgment, relevance, and materiality, etc. Find right fit for purpose, and provide not a narrower governance but a wider governance to the wider spectrum of reporting, as I was mentioning earlier, not only to BRSR sort of core reporting, but to whatever we communicate as corporate to all stakeholders. And governance will always be a function of what's the scope, how does it broaden, how do we move from historical to forward looking, how do we start understanding the value creation and the value of intangibles these businesses have, and can ESGs be the ESG levers manifest in the values that the businesses have, etc. And as we move from comply or explain to actually perform and tell the story. So it's an exciting journey. We are all stakeholders in this, and good for practitioners, good for people like us and on the panel and audience to be part of this profound journey that we are at this point. So thank you, everyone. Lovely panel, rich experience. We have addressed some of these critical issues. I'm sure there are some questions which are not met. I think the Protiviti organization will sort of figure out answers and embed them. And just a thought, does it make sense? Because there are a lot more options that we all of us will exercise in dealing with these challenges. So maybe we should collate some of those option thoughts and play that back into our respective industries as associations and organizations, directly and indirectly through to the regulators, to really make great sense of what we are seeking to communicate, and so that the stakeholders also can have a better understanding. Because otherwise, perception can soon become reality, and we don't want to be on the wrong side of it as corporate business India, right? So with that, I take a pause. I hand it over back, and thank you. Have a great evening. Wish all of you, the panel members as well as the audience, happy Diwali and a great festive season ahead.
Thank you.
everyone.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Diwali.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Bye.
Thank you, everybody, for your time, and a very happy Diwali to everybody. Thank you so much.
Wish you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Namaskar, everyone. Thank you.
Happy Diwali. Thank you.
Happy Diwali.